I was standing in my own kitchen, frozen with a tray of lemon cookies in my hands, when I heard my brother tell his children that I'd never had kids, so naturally I'd leave them everything when I died. He said it so casually, like he was discussing the weather, like my entire life's purpose was to be their eventual ATM machine. That was 3 months ago. Yesterday, those same nieces and nephews sat in my living room while my lawyer read them the news. The looks on their faces, I'll remember those forever. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a single overheard sentence changed everything. My name is Catherine Wells, though most people call me Catherine, never Kathy, never Kate. I'm 70 years old, and I've spent the better part of 5 decades building something most people only dream about. I'm not talking about just money, though yes, there's plenty of that. I'm talking about a life built brick by brick through decisions that were mine alone to make. I never married, not because I couldn't, but because I never found someone who made me want to compromise the life I was building. I dated, of course. There was even one man back when I was 32 who came close. But when he suggested I might want to scale back my real estate investments to focus on starting a family, I knew we wanted different things. I don't regret that choice. Not even a little bit. What I built instead was an empire, modest by Wall Street standards perhaps, but impressive by any reasonable measure. I started with a small inheritance from my grandmother, $15,000 that my brother Richard spent on a boat he sold 3 years later at a loss. I put mine into my first rental property, then another, then another. I worked as a legal secretary during the day and managed properties at night. By the time I was 40, I owned 18 units. By 50, I'd diversified into commercial real estate. By 60, I'd sold most of it and invested the proceeds wisely. Today at 70, I'm what they call comfortable. My portfolio is worth just over $4 million. I own my home outright. A beautiful colonial in Connecticut with gardens that took me 20 years to perfect. I take 2 trips a year. I donate to causes I believe in, and I've never once lost sleep over a mortgage payment or a credit card bill. I also never had children. That wasn't a choice I agonized over. It simply never happened, and I never felt the universe was denying me something essential. I poured that maternal energy into other things. My gardens, my book club, my mentorship of young women starting their careers, my volunteer work at the women's shelter. My brother Richard took a different path. He married young, had 3 children, and worked a comfortable middle management job for 37 years. He was never ambitious like I was, but he was content. Or so I thought. His wife Sharon was nice enough, though we never bonded deeply. Their kids, Michael, Brenda, and Julia, grew up in a suburban house 2 hours from mine. I sent birthday cards, Christmas gifts, showed up for graduations. I was the aunt who remembered, but not the aunt they called just to chat. And that was fine. I had my life. They had theirs. It was a Thursday in late July when everything changed. I wasn't expecting visitors. At 70, my calendar is full, but it's organized. I don't like surprises much anymore. So when my doorbell rang at 3 in the afternoon and I found Richard standing there with Michael, Brenda, and Julia behind him, my first reaction was concern. "Is everything all right?" I asked, already imagining health scares or family emergencies. "Everything's fine," Richard said too brightly. "We were just in the area and thought we'd stop by. Surprise!" Something felt off immediately. My brother and I were cordial, but we weren't drop-by unannounced close. And all 3 of his kids, now in their 30s and 40s, together on a Thursday afternoon. Michael lived in Boston. Brenda was in Philadelphia. Julia was the only one still in Connecticut. This wasn't casual, but I'm not rude. I invited them in, put on coffee, pulled out the lemon cookies I'd baked that morning for my book club meeting. They settled into my living room, and the strangest thing happened. They looked around. Not the way you look at a room when you're visiting, the way you assess property. I watched Brenda's eyes trace the crown molding, saw Michael take in the original hardwood floors, noticed Julia's gaze linger on the antique sideboard that had belonged to our grandmother. The conversation was stilted. Richard asked about my health with an intensity that felt intrusive. Julia wanted to know if I found the house too much to manage at my age. Michael asked if I'd updated my insurance lately. I'm 70, not 90, I said, trying to keep my tone light. I manage just fine. Of course, Richard said quickly. We just worry about you, all alone in this big house. That stung a little, though I didn't show it. I've never been lonely. Alone and lonely aren't the same thing, and I've spent my entire adult life trying to make people understand that distinction. After about 45 minutes of this awkward conversation, I excused myself to refill the cookie tray. My kitchen is separated from the living room by a doorway and a short hallway. They clearly didn't realize how well sound carries in these old houses. That's when I heard it. When do you think? Julia's voice, quiet but clear. Oh, hopefully not for years and years. That was Richard, but his tone was strange. Not sad or worried, calculating. But she's 70 now. These things happen. I just don't want there to be any complications. Michael, always the worrier. Has she said anything about her plans? She doesn't need to. Richard's voice grew more confident. Think about it. Auntie Catherine never had children, never married. We're her only family. It all comes to us naturally. The tray nearly slipped from my hands. I gripped the counter, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. You really think it's that much? Brenda this time. The house alone is worth at least $800,000, probably more, Richard said. And she's got those investments. She's been careful her whole life. I'd estimate 3, maybe 4 million total. My God, Julia breathed the words. That's over $1 million each, even after taxes. Could be more if we sell everything quickly, Michael added. Real estate is still strong. The point is, Richard said, and I could hear the smile in his voice, Auntie Catherine never had children, so she'll leave us everything. It's just a matter of time. We just need to be patient and stay close. Visit more often. Make sure she remembers we care. Remembers we care. As if my memory were the thing in question, as if their sudden attention was motivated by love and not by appraisal. I stood in my kitchen, holding a plate of lemon cookies, and felt something inside me ice over. These weren't the words of people hoping an elderly relative would live a long, healthy life. These were the words of people waiting for an inheritance, counting money that was still mine, planning lives funded by my death. I took 3 deep breaths. Then I walked back into the living room with a smile that felt like it could crack my face. Here we are, I said brightly, setting down the cookies. Julia, you mentioned you needed to leave soon for an appointment? It was a lie, but Julia seized it gratefully. They'd gotten what they came for, a visual inventory of their future assets. Within 10 minutes, they were all standing on my porch, promising to visit again soon. Richard hugged me, and I felt nothing but cold certainty in my chest. Take care of yourself, sis, he said. We worry about you. I watched them drive away. Then I went inside, sat at my kitchen table, and let myself feel the full weight of what I'd heard. I didn't cry. That's not really my way. Instead, I did what I've always done when facing a problem. I analyzed it. Fact 1, my brother and his children saw me not as a person, but as an eventual payday. Fact 2, they'd clearly discussed this before. This wasn't idle speculation. They'd calculated values, discussed timing, used the word naturally, as if my entire estate was already theirs. Fact 3, the only relationship they wanted to maintain with me was one that secured their inheritance. I thought about all those birthday cards I'd sent, all those checks for graduations and weddings. I thought about the time I helped Richard with his mortgage when he was laid off for 6 months. I thought about the investment advice I'd given Michael when he started his first job. I'd thought we were family in the distant but functional way many families are, but I'd been wrong. I wasn't a person to them. I was a retirement plan. Here's what hurt most. The phrase, never had children, said like it was a character flaw. Like my childlessness was sad for me but convenient for them. Never mind that I'd built everything I had through my own effort. Never mind that I'd made choices that honored who I actually was instead of who society expected me to be. To them, my lack of children meant only one thing: more money for them. I sat at that kitchen table until the sun went down, and then I made a decision. If they were going to treat my life like something that existed only to eventually benefit them, I would show them exactly how wrong they were. That night, I barely slept. My mind was racing with possibilities, with anger, with something that felt almost like grief. But by morning, I knew what I was going to do. I'd spent my entire adult life making smart decisions. This would be another one. At 8 a.m. sharp, I called my lawyer, Dennis Morrison. We'd worked together for 23 years. He'd handled my property acquisitions, my will, my trusts. He knew my finances better than anyone. "Dennis," I said when he answered, "I need to discuss my estate plan. I'm making some significant changes." "Of course, Catherine. What did you have in mind?" "I'm going to need a few days to work out the details, but I want you to start drawing up paperwork for a legal adoption." There was a pause. "An adoption?" "Catherine, you're 70 years old." "I'm aware. I'm adopting an adult. It's perfectly legal." "Well, yes, adult adoptions are certainly legal, but may I ask who you're planning to adopt?" "I'm still deciding," I said, "but I'll know soon." The truth was, I already had an idea. For the past 3 years, I'd been volunteering at a women's shelter in Hartford. Every Tuesday morning, I'd go in and teach a class on financial literacy, budgeting, credit scores, savings plans, practical stuff that most of these women had never had the chance to learn. Some were fleeing abuse, others were struggling with addiction or mental health challenges. All of them were trying to rebuild lives that had been broken. One woman had stood out from the beginning. Her name was Sarah Chen, and she was 34 years old when we met. She'd left an abusive marriage with nothing but the clothes she was wearing and her 7-year-old daughter, Emma. No family support. Her parents had died years ago, and she'd been isolated from friends during her marriage. No savings, no credit history in her own name, no college degree. But she had something that couldn't be taught: determination. Sarah never missed my Tuesday class, even when she was working 2 jobs. She took notes. She asked questions. She followed every piece of advice I gave her. Within 6 months, she had a secured credit card and a modest savings account. Within a year, she'd moved into her own apartment. Within 2 years, she'd enrolled in night classes at the community college. We'd developed a relationship that went beyond the classroom. I'd become something of a mentor to her, and she'd become someone I genuinely cared about. I'd helped her with her taxes, co-signed her first apartment lease, given her advice when Emma was struggling in school. She'd invited me to Emma's 8th birthday party, her 9th, her 10th. I taught Emma to bake cookies and helped her with her math homework. Sarah reminded me of myself at that age, fierce, independent, determined to build something better. And Emma, bright-eyed and hungry for knowledge, reminded me of what I might have been as a child if I'd had the advantages I could now provide. I'd watched them struggle for 3 years, watched Sarah work herself to exhaustion while going to school, watched Emma wear the same winter coat 2 years in a row because new ones weren't in the budget. I'd helped where I could, but Sarah was proud. She accepted advice and opportunities, but never handouts. That Friday morning, I drove to the diner where Sarah waited tables on weekends. Emma was in school, so we could talk privately. Sarah looked tired. She always looked tired. But she smiled when she saw me, that genuine smile that had first made me invest my time in her. "Catherine, what brings you here? Want some coffee?" "Actually, Sarah, I want to talk to you about something. Do you have a break coming up?" We sat in a booth in the back. I ordered coffee I didn't want. Sarah sat across from me, her hands wrapped around her mug, curious but not anxious. We'd built enough trust that she didn't assume the worst anymore. "Sarah, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear me all the way through before you respond. Can you do that?" She nodded, her expression growing serious. I want to legally adopt you and Emma as my family. I want to do this because over the past 3 years, you've become more important to me than people I'm related to by blood. I've watched you fight for a better life with more courage and grace than most people could manage. I've watched Emma grow into a remarkable little girl, and I've realized that family isn't always about who you're born to. Sometimes it's about who shows up, who cares, who makes the effort. Sarah's eyes had gone wide. Her mouth opened, but I kept going. I'm 70 years old and comfortably wealthy. I have no children of my own, and I've recently learned that the family I do have sees me as nothing more than an eventual inheritance. You and Emma have never asked me for anything beyond advice and opportunity. You've worked for everything you have, and I want to make sure that when I'm gone, everything I've built goes to people who will value it not because of the money, but because of what it represents. Catherine, I'm not finished. This isn't charity. This is me choosing my family. If you agree, you'll be my legal daughter. Emma will be my legal granddaughter. You'll inherit everything I have, but more importantly, you'll have family. Real family. Someone who shows up for school plays and birthday parties and Tuesday dinners. Someone who cares whether Emma gets into a good college and whether you finish your degree. Someone who's in your corner not because they have to be, but because they want to be. Sarah was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. I need you to think about it, I said gently. This is a huge decision. Talk to Emma. Take your time, but know that I'm serious, and I'm certain. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Can I respond now? I smiled. Yes. Catherine, you've already been family to us. You've already shown up for us in ways no one else ever has. If you want to make it legal, if you want to call me your daughter and call Emma your granddaughter, we would be honored. We'd be so honored. Her voice broke. You've given us so much already. I don't need your money. I just need to know that Emma has someone besides me who loves her, that we're not alone in the world. I reached across the table and took her hand. You're not alone, and you never will be again. Dennis thought I was crazy. He said it diplomatically, of course, but I could read between the lines. Catherine, I have to ask, are you certain this isn't a hasty decision? Adult adoptions can be contested, especially by biological family members who might claim undue influence or... Let them try, I said calmly. Sarah has never asked me for money. She's never manipulated me or tried to influence my decisions. She doesn't even know the full extent of my estate. I have 3 years of documentation showing our relationship, witness statements from the shelter, from my book club, from my neighbors. This isn't a whim, Dennis. This is me choosing my family. The paperwork took 6 weeks. Connecticut law is actually quite favorable to adult adoptions, especially when all parties consent and there's no question of exploitation. Sarah and I both submitted to psychological evaluations to prove we were of sound mind. Emma, at 10 years old, had to give her consent as well, which she did enthusiastically. Does this mean I can call you Grandma? She asked me, her eyes bright. If you'd like to, I said. I'd like to very much. The adoption was finalized on a Tuesday in October. We stood in a courtroom with Dennis, a family court judge, and 2 witnesses. It wasn't dramatic or emotional in the way TV makes these things look. It was quiet and official and legally binding. When the judge signed the papers, Sarah was legally Catherine Wells' daughter. Emma was legally my granddaughter, and my entire estate, every penny, and property would go to them. We celebrated with lunch at Emma's favorite restaurant, a pizza place with terrible decor and excellent breadsticks. Emma wore a dress she'd picked out special for the occasion. Sarah looked lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years, the bone-deep certainty that I'd made exactly the right choice. I didn't tell Richard. I didn't tell any of them. I went about my life as normal. I sent birthday cards. I answered the phone when Richard called, which he started doing more frequently. I maintained the pleasant, distant relationship we'd always had, but I also did something else. I rewrote my will completely. I left detailed explanations for why I'd made the choices I made. I documented that conversation I'd overheard, the dates, the exact words. I wanted it crystal clear that this wasn't senility or manipulation. This was a conscious choice made by a woman who understood exactly what she was doing. 3 months passed. During that time, Sarah finished her associate degree. Emma made the honor roll. I taught them both how to make my grandmother's apple pie recipe. We had Sunday dinners. We went to the movies. We became what we'd legally declared ourselves to be, a family. Richard called to say he and the kids were planning another visit. "Just want to check in on you, sis," he said. "You know we care." I almost laughed. Instead, I said, "That would be lovely." They arrived on a Saturday afternoon in January. All of them again. Richard, Sharon, Michael, Brenda, Julia. They'd clearly decided that maintaining their presence was part of securing their future. I served tea and cookies. I let them ask their thinly veiled questions about my health and my plans. I nodded along as Richard suggested again that the house was too much for a woman my age, and then I said, "Actually, I have some news I'd like to share with all of you." They leaned forward, interest clear on their faces, probably thinking I was going to announce I'd updated my will and wanted to discuss my wishes. They'd probably rehearsed their responses, gracious, modest, appropriately sad at the thought of my eventual demise. "I've adopted a daughter," I said calmly. "Her name is Sarah. She has a 10-year-old daughter named Emma. They're my legal family now." You could have heard a pin drop. Richard's face went blank with shock. Sharon looked confused. Michael, Brenda, and Julia all started talking at once. "You what? Adopted? At your age? Is this legal? Who is this person? Catherine, have you been taken advantage of?" I held up a hand, and they fell silent. "Sarah is a woman I've known for 3 years. She's earned an associate degree while working 2 jobs and raising her daughter alone. She's one of the most remarkable people I've ever met, and she's never asked me for a single thing except advice. Emma is bright, kind, and curious. They've become my family in every way that matters, and now that's official." Richard found his voice. "Catherine, this is insane. We're your family. We're your blood." "You're my brother," I corrected. "But family is more than blood, Richard. It's about who shows up, who cares, who sees you as a person and not a retirement fund." Brenda went pale. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about your visit last July. I'm talking about the conversation you had in my living room while I was in the kitchen. The one where you calculated the value of my estate and discussed how much you'd each inherit. The one where you called me Auntie Catherine, like I was a wealthy spinster in a Victorian novel who existed purely to fund your futures." The silence was deafening. Richard's face had gone from shocked to red. "Catherine, you misunderstood." "I didn't misunderstand anything. I heard you clearly. You said, and I quote, 'Auntie Catherine never had children, so she'll leave us everything. It's just a matter of time.' You discussed my death like it was a business transaction. You appraised my house while sitting in it. You calculated how much you'd make if you sold everything quickly." "That's not, we were just," Julia stammered. "You were planning your windfalls while I was baking you cookies," I said. My voice was calm, but my words were not. "Not once did any of you ask how I was really doing. Not once did you call just to chat. Every conversation was fishing for information. Every visit was an inventory. You didn't see me, you saw assets." Michael stood up. "We're contesting this. You're 70 years old. Someone clearly influenced—" "Sit down, Michael." I didn't raise my voice, but something in my tone made him pause. "I'm 70, not incompetent. I underwent a psychological evaluation. So did Sarah. The adoption is legal and ironclad. Dennis has documented everything, including what I overheard from you. If you want to drag this into court and have your greed put on public record, be my guest." Sharon, who'd been silent this whole time, put a hand on Richard's arm. "Maybe we should go." "Good idea," I said. "But before you do, let me be absolutely clear. I've lived my entire adult life making my own choices. I built my wealth through hard work and smart decisions. I chose not to marry, not to have children, and I've been happy. Now I've chosen my family, and that family is Sarah and Emma. When I die, they'll inherit everything. Not because I'm senile or manipulated, but because they earned it by being family in the truest sense of the word." Richard stood up, his face still red. "You're making a mistake." "No, Richard. The mistake was thinking I owed you something for existing. The mistake was treating me like a placeholder for your inheritance. The mistake was forgetting that I'm a human being with feelings and ears and the ability to make my own choices." They left. They didn't say goodbye. They just walked out of my house and drove away. I sat in the silence for a moment. Then I called Sarah and asked if she and Emma wanted to come over for dinner. That was 3 weeks ago. Richard has called twice, leaving voicemails that I haven't returned. Michael sent an email with the subject line, "Family Discussion," that I deleted without reading. Brenda and Julia haven't reached out at all. My lawyer says they might try to contest the adoption or the will, but he's confident they don't have grounds. I documented everything. I was thorough. And I have a whole community of witnesses who can attest to my relationship with Sarah and Emma, my sound mind, and the authenticity of our family bond. Last Sunday, Emma asked if she could plant tulip bulbs in my garden for spring. Sarah is studying for her final exams to complete her bachelor's degree. We're planning a small party for when she graduates. I'm teaching Emma to bake bread. We've started a tradition of Sunday dinners where Emma sets the table and Sarah and I cook together. This morning, Emma said, "Grandma, can you help me with my history project?" And my heart did something strange and wonderful, because that's what this is about. Not money, not inheritance, not securing assets. It's about being someone's grandmother, about having Sunday dinners and Tuesday game nights, about teaching a little girl to garden and watching her mother finally have the chance to build the life she deserves. It's about being chosen and choosing back. Richard and his children thought they had claim to my life's work because we shared genetics and a last name. They thought family was something you inherited automatically, like eye color or height. They were waiting for me to die so they could cash in. Sarah and Emma taught me that family is something you build. It's something you choose and work at and show up for. It's cookies on Tuesday afternoons and homework help and someone calling you just to tell you about their day. It's being seen as a person, not a bank account. It's love that doesn't come with an appraiser's estimate attached. I'm 70 years old. I've built a good life through hard work and smart choices. And my final choice, to choose my family rather than accept the one that saw me only as an inheritance, might be the smartest one I've ever made. My brother told his kids I'd leave them everything because I never had children. He was half right. I never had children. But that doesn't mean I'll die without family. It just means I got to choose them. And I chose Sarah and Emma. I chose the people who saw me as Catherine, not as Auntie Catherine's estate. I chose the family that showed up. Last week, Emma brought home a school assignment. She had to draw a picture of her family. She drew 3 people, her mother, herself, and me. At the top, in careful 10-year-old handwriting, she wrote, "My family." I've had that picture framed. It sits on my mantle now next to the legal adoption papers. Some people might say I'm a bitter old woman who disinherited her family out of spite. Those people would be wrong. I'm a woman who spent 70 years learning that family is a choice, not an obligation. That love is measured in presence, not genetics. That the greatest gift I can give isn't money, it's showing up. Richard and his children are learning that lesson the hard way. But that's not my concern anymore. My concern is making sure Emma knows her times tables for her test on Friday. My concern is helping Sarah study for her economics final. My concern is planning our summer garden and teaching Emma how to make pie crust from scratch. Those are the concerns of a woman with family, real family, the kind you choose and the kind that chooses you back. And when my time comes, years from now, God willing, I'll leave this world knowing that everything I built will go to people who valued me for who I was, not what I had. To a daughter who made her own way despite every obstacle. To a granddaughter who calls me grandma and means it. That's not revenge. That's justice. That's love. That's family. That's everything.